Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Little Learners on the Go. I am so excited for season 4. I hope you all have been enjoying it up until this point. And I just want to welcome a guest on today. Her name is, well, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my kiddos call me Dr. Gigi. I'm Virginia or Gigi Gallup Larsen. I'm both a clinical psychologist and a school psychologist.
Awesome. And I have the privilege to work with Dr. Gigi right now, but I
Oh,
just,
my privilege,
oh,
Miss
thank
Tanya.
you. As you all know, about regarding Little Learners on the Go, we want to educate educators, parents, and families just for children. We want to continue to be advocates for early childhood education, and so this is why we do what we do, right? Not just through this podcast and or YouTube video. However, this is our day-to-day work, and so I overwhelmingly received, when are you bringing back the podcast? When are you bringing back the podcast? And so I thank you all for sending in information that you want to hear about, because this is how we get the information so that we can talk to you all as families and as parents to educate you. So today we're going to be talking about helping children cope with anxiety. And we're just going to have a candid conversation today, Dr. Gigi. And,
Sounds good.
this is something that I've seen. We really have to think about, what is anxiety and the factors that can cause it, because I've been doing this for 18 years, and, so many things. I just want to talk to you all as parents. So many things can cause anxiety. And I won't say it's all your fault, or necessarily it's not a fault finding situation. It just could be the situation that you're in at the time, right? Anxiety can be caused by the loss of a loved one. Anxiety can be caused by grandma or grandpa, going back, i.e., even their own country, or maybe grandma and grandpa were here for a month or two, or helped to nurture your child. And now, you are transitioning them into childcare or school. And so all of these things, or maybe the sibling or an older sibling has gone off, maybe dad is in the military. All of these things can cause anxiety in children. We think, even in us as adults, but I always call them little people, right? They're like, little people. I'm like, yeah, you're little people, and one day you're going to grow up, but you're just going to be a bigger person. And so I think sometimes as parents, we think that, we can shield our child sometimes from all of this, or, oh, well, if I don't show any signs, it's not going to affect them. And that's not the case, right? It's
Right.
not to say that you're not doing a great job as a parent, but sometimes we have to talk about things with our children in order to help them cope, right? That's why we're saying helping children cope with anxiety. How do you cope with something if you're not dealing with something, right? Mom or dad or caregiver, and you're just going on about your day because that's the way you cope. That does not necessarily relate over to the child.
Mhm.
And so I think we really need to talk about that. So, Dr. Gigi, can you just tell us, clinically, what is an anxiety and what factors could cause it?
Sure, sure. So I think the first thing I want to do is just normalize anxiety. So anxiety is a normal human emotion, and actually, in just the right dose, it's a helpful thing. Sort of like
Mhm.
Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Too much, we get ramped up and we have a hard time. Too little, we're not motivated. Just right is what motivates us to do what we need to do. Anxiety is what caused you and I to be here on time, but it wasn't too much. It wasn't too little. It was just the right amount. I think the thing that we are seeing, though, clinically, is definitely an increase in anxiety in children and parents. And I think also, to kind of help normalize it a little bit, I think we're living in the age of anxiety. And I think many clinicians feel that way as well. We've got so many factors that are outside of our homes that we all are worried and concerned about, whether that's finances or political, changes, or things to do with the climate or what have you. We are living in a time where I think anxiety is a little more prominent. I think has been more so after the COVID pandemic. We definitely saw an uptick in both children and adults' mental health needs after that period. And I think we're still experiencing some of that fallout. But in terms of clinically, when we start thinking about, well, if we have too much anxiety, and the way we know that is it starts to interfere with our everyday life and or our relationships. And so some of the symptoms of that can include uncontrollable worry. So as adults, we tend to ruminate. For children, they may as well, but it may look different. There may be difficulties concentrating. There may be sleep or appetite changes that happen. With little ones, we tend to see physical symptoms. So my tummy hurts, I have a headache. We might see irritability where they're having more tantrums. We might see more clinging behavior where they cling on to you or cling on to the teacher. And overall, it's sort of that feeling of being on edge. And when we become concerned about it is, again, when those symptoms start interfering with our day-to-day life and our relationships. And I agree with you 100%, Tanya. I think, as parents, we all, anxiety is an emotion. It's a normal emotion. Emotions aren't good or bad. They just are. They tell us there's something to pay attention to. And so when we're also having trouble managing our anxiety, or as parents, we really hate to see our children experiencing distress. But hopefully maybe today through our conversation, we can help reframe that, because we can't protect our children from distressing situations in life. The key is to help them learn to regulate through it and cope with it.
I think that is great what you were saying about, it being an emotion, because, I actually love this work because, this is the groundwork, in regards to how they're going to perceive life, how they're going to view life, how they're going to be able to work through things, navigate things. They're little ones, right? Everything's developing at the same time, right? We know the first 5 years are the most formative years. And so maybe that parent has not been taught to cope with something, right? So they really don't understand, you may be parent working through these emotions at the same time as your child. And I just want to encourage you that that's quite all right. I think, like you see it, normalizing it, to not think, oh, am I crazy or something? No, that's not what we're saying. But oftentimes we see that, even when you're saying after, definitely after COVID, but just depending on your background and how you're brought up, you may not have ever had or were taught to express your emotions or your feelings, okay? And so, like Dr. Gigi was saying, what are signs we can look for in our children? And it's something you said before you go into this, when you were talking about the tummy hurting or the headache, sometimes parents, we have to dive deep. Educators too. I don't want to just talk. We have to dive deep. We really have to take a look. Okay, maybe it's a one-off, but are you making those observations in the classroom, right? And I just think to even be in the field of education, especially with little, period, but when you're dealing with little ones, you have to pack on 29 book bags of patience. You have to,
Most definitely.
You are the cook, the chef, the referee, right? So there's a lot of nurturing. That's why I was started with that, that you have to have. There's a level of compassion that you have to have regarding little children. And so there's this inclination in you to say, something's off, right? Something's going on. And I've just done this through the years, it could be a child that's been going great, something, everything's been going well in their behavior. And all of a sudden there's a spike.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, wait, what's going on? Reach out to the educator, reach out to the family to ask them, is something changed, in at home, or parents, reach out to the educator. Sometimes when you're seeing these behaviors, hey, are they showing these same behaviors in school? I think we have to understand that working together is the thing, right? We're concerned about the whole child and so parents and educators, take yourself out of the equation in a sense for a little bit and look at it from the child's perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that is what helps us in this field.
Yeah.
So
and sometimes I was going to say, and in relation to that, sometimes we might see different things at home and school.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there are kiddos that work so hard to please their teacher and their parents, and they kind of hold it together at school. And then when they get home, it kind of all unravels. And one of the things I always reassure the parents I work with is that lets you know that you're their safe place. They know they are loved. They know home is a safe place because I can let the ugly hang out when I get home. For others, it may be that we see it more in school. And part of that is we have more demands than at home. At home, we can be a little more flexible. Whereas at school, we have routines, we have learning objectives we need to meet. And so for some children, parents may say, well, I'm not seeing this so much at home. And it might be because the demands are different too. My apologies for interrupting you there.
Oh, no. I totally agree with you. Because I've seen that quite often where, the child understands. And I think sometimes the coping with the anxiety, moving into kind of what are some strategies parents can use to assist with the anxiety is creating in your safe space, create a routine. Mm-hmm. I think because we as humans in our nature, we need routine. We all do. We don't always like it. Okay, let's be honest.
Right.
But we need routine. Routine does not mean so stringent that you don't have a place to relax or just kind of, if you choose to do nothing at that moment. But in that safe space, create that space, to have an open conversation, an open dialogue. I think, and I have my children, my sons are 22, almost 23 and 19. And this is something, I've just really had to keep my finger on. And even though I may be dealing with something as well, I remember reaching out to the teachers when my mom was ill, right? Hey, and they were in high school or middle school at this time, but still, hey, if you see anything, I just want to let you know what's going on at home. If you see something, please let me know, or please have a conversation. I trusted the staff of the school to have a conversation with them about it, right? My sons didn't have to know at that moment, but I wanted to give them a headline like, hey, I think we have to realize, like, I think that's a good analogy. Give a headline, like this is a headliner, like something's going on and I just need you to know, right?
Yeah.
And we see this. I just think, COVID has done a lot. But like you said, Dr. Gigi, we've seen this so much. Divorce can cause anxiety, separation can cause anxiety, and because there's a disruption in the routine, right? Mm-hmm. So, what are some strategies that you would suggest?
Sure. So I think the first thing is kind of the mindset. So, we teach children how to read. We teach children how to count. We teach them their alphabet. Well, coping skills are that exact same thing in learning about emotion. So I'm a big fan of co-regulation and attachment, using that relationship that you have with your child to join with them in that moment and help them to learn to cope. So one of the things about anxiety that we know is it's this heightened physiological state, right? So for most of us, our heart rate increases, our breathing becomes more shallow. We may have temperature changes in our body. So there's a very real physical response when we have anxiety. The good news is our bodies are built such that it is impossible for us to maintain that level too high. So eventually, even with waiting out, anxiety will naturally come down on its own. Now, that said, it's hard to do that. It's hard to wait out. So there are some things that we know we can engage. So One of the things as therapists that we like to do is engage what's called the parasympathetic response. We want to lower that heart rate. We want to return our breathing back to diaphragmatic breathing rather than shallow breathing that's at the top of our lungs. So we can sit there with our child and have them do breathing. I mean, as you know, and I know you do this in your classroom, we can have some little tricks for little ones. So it might be, this time of year, hot cocoa is a favorite, right? So we might want to breathe in the steam or breathe in the smell of the chocolate and blow away the steam. So we'll take a deep breath in, we might hold it and then blow it out. Co-regulation is when we do it with our child. So we might sit with them, look at them, hold their hands, hold them and say, let's breathe together. And then we'll pace that out and help them breathe. They also, sometimes children just need a hug when they're distressed. That doesn't mean we're reinforcing negative behavior necessarily. We can do a both and, right? I might have an expectation that you need to go get your shoes right now, and you might be upset about that. I can take a break for a moment and say, do you need a hug? Okay, let me give you a hug. I know you're not ready to go. It's frustrating not to be able to stay and play this game or watch Miss Rachel or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
We need to go. So let's go get your shoes. So we can get your shoes. We can cope with that together. We can also just wait it out. And, one of the beautiful things about little ones, we can distract them. we might even be able to covertly use some other strategies. There's something called grounding. Mm-hmm. So anxiety is one of those things that either takes us in the past, we're worrying about what happened, or it puts us in the future, we're worrying about what's yet to come, when really we need to be in that present moment. And that's what grounding is all about, is staying right here in this moment. So one of the things I love to do with little ones is something called sensory grounding. So I might have them just listen for things they hear. And so we'll do that. And then we might look for certain things. I'll have them describe it in detail. Or what do we smell? Or what do we feel? We can even do that with food. If it's happening over a meal or we're at a restaurant, we can slow things down and have them really listen to what they hear, look at what they see and describe what they can, or point out things, or we can narrate it. If they don't have their words just yet, we can say, oh, I hear people talking, I see the color of the corn that you have is yellow, but when the light hits it, it's a little white right there. That distracts them, but it also brings them very much into the present moment, which is where we want to be when we're too focused on the past or the future.
I think that's good. And I want to, even with, I just want to mention transitions. Transitions are good. Especially with this age, it allows children to kind of understand what's next, right? Or what, giving timers, using a timer on your phone, or, okay, you're watching, like you said, Miss Rachel, or whatever it may be, or I don't know, but okay, you 2 more minutes, and then we're going to have to turn that off, as opposed to parents. Okay, because now the anxiety is not going to be with just them. It's going to be with you.
Yes. Even as that's because we're worried about that future temper tantrum that's coming, right?
Because the truth is, it's coming. Yeah. So if you don't allow, if you say, okay, 2 more minutes, and you set the timer, then they can gauge some things. I believe it helps to kind of keep them grounded. I do a lot of breathing exercises. I do that every morning with the children. I do breathing exercises. We stretch. Yes. Every morning. We stretch every morning. We close our eyes. We breathe in our nose, out our mouths, right? 3 times every day. And I think it helps me too. It helps the staff. It helps the children, and I always say, okay, now how do you feel? Right. And I think also when you're helping your child or children to cope with anxiety, allowing them to know that their feelings are valid, right? Okay, you're upset at this moment, and I understand that you're upset. However, it's not okay for you to hurt yourself or hurt others. Giving them the language that they may not have, is okay. It's okay to have a moment. It really is. I understand you're upset, but it's not okay to hurt others in the moment
Right.
as well, right? So I think those are just tips and tools that I've used throughout the
Yeah.
years to say, okay, and I understand it. It's okay. You can go regroup. That's my word, regroup.
Mm-hmm.
Go regroup, have a
Mm-hmm.
seat, have a moment, because we all need it. I think
Yeah.
the reality is we are, think about it, parents, we got to get up. Like Dr. Gigi was saying, maybe they don't want to put on those pair of shoes. They completely dress themselves and now they're going to get to shoes
Right.
and have a whole meltdown on you. Okay.
Yes.
Like,
Right.
what
Right.
just
When you're
happened?
already late, when you're already running late to work and your boss is going to be waiting. Yes, absolutely.
Ay, 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 ay. And so, I remember those moments and those times. We do. To me, we live in a very fast-paced society, and everything is go, go, ready, set, go. Like when your feet touch the floor, it's go. And I think sometimes parents, you may have to allot more time. You may actually have to a lot more time. I remember one of my sons, he oh my gosh, don't get him up in the morning. He was just like his mommy. Don't wake
Yes.
me up. I listen, if it's not like 8 o'clock, I can start functioning, but 6:50, I have to function. Okay, so it's going to be limited. But knowing your child, I think is a great,
Yeah.
it is good, right? And knowing the phase of their life that they're in. I'm sorry. I believe every parent should have a parenting course of some sort, or
Oh, I
at
agree
least
100%. And not because there's a problem, but
no.
parenting is humbling. And every child is different and every stage is different. And just when you're getting your sea legs and you're ready to go, it up and changes. Or it doesn't work. It works with one child, but not the other. Absolutely.
Exactly. And I think we have to be mindful of that when we're helping them to cope and helping yourself cope with the child. I mean, it's a two-way communication here. And
Yeah.
so, knowing where they are developmentally, knowing where the house may be, your safe space is at that time, all of those things help to, if you can stay grounded with your child as well, I think it really helps the situation. I don't want to take the parent out of the narrative or the educator out, because we're very much a part of the
Right.
narrative of what's going on or taking place at that very moment.
Yeah, and we are human too. So we also experience those emotions. I think those coping strategies that you walk through every day with the children, that's exactly what we want to do. We don't want to wait until we're in distress to figure out how to use coping strategies. We want that to be a regular part of how we do, so that it's easier to employ when we need it most. And I think too, something you said about, sort of, it's not just about the child, but parents also. I have to say, in the work that I do, I don't, in the private practice, well, and even in the schools, right? We don't just work with the child, we work with parents and the family as a whole. And I think that's important. I think sometimes we might, as parents, think we're doing our children a favor by sheltering them from distressing situations. And I have to say, in the more than 20 years that I've been doing this, I do see an increase in both parents' difficulties coping and managing and tolerating distress, and their children also doing that. And sometimes parents preventing distress, because I think there have been some wrong messages or some misunderstood messages out there about that we need to shelter our children. And that's just not the case, because in life, most of us have to walk some tough roads sometimes. There are seasons in our lives that are difficult. There are moments in our lives that are distressing, and we need to be able to have the coping skills to be able to get through it. And also the belief in ourselves that this is hard, but I can do this. And so one of the biggest favors we can help our children with is to acknowledge and give them the language, right? Help them, like you said, help them label the emotions they're experiencing, acknowledging that exist. But also, sometimes we just have to get through. So let's do that together.
Wow, that was amazing. That is truly amazing. And I just think about, when you were talking, I think about showing children, or showing them videos about if a fire were to break out, or, this work, now that I'm on this side of the profession at this time, I realized we had to do a drill on if there was a shooting in a school. Now, no one wants to, think about that. But the reality, which is still unfortunate, I am never going to say, I think my heart is so for children, so I can't really fathom that. But we have to understand that these things could possibly be a reality. And having these drills or talking to the children about what's about to happen or could happen, right? I know sometimes when we've had drills, I'll say, okay, we're going to have this, but let's look at it. Let's listen to the sounds, like you were saying, Dr. Gigi. I think we have to also, parents, please, I beseech you, take away the iPad, take away the phone, take away the electronics. I know the times we're living in, and I'm not saying technology does not have its place, but when it comes to little children, I've posted things about this, about how much screen time is too much, like TOO, too much. There's too much going on in their development at this time, and they can't distinguish between reality and what's not, so we really have to, I think, like you were saying, talking to them. Okay, what do we hear, right? You can hear the video. You don't have to see the video. There's something happening cognitively when we do this, but it also, parents, just think about it. It gives your child a sense of awareness of what's going on around them. Right. So if they hear that fire truck, how close is that fire truck? Right. Because again, the anxiety could start happening, but what do I need to do? And so talking things out with your children, is really good. Turning down the light sometimes, transitions, right? Or it could be, okay, I'm going to count to 3, right? But helping them through this. They may not count, but you could count, right?
Absolutely.
Having these transitional pieces with your children and just having those conversations, it really does help to minimize anxiety. It doesn't mean that it's still not there, but it really helps the children to stay calm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, right, the first time that there's the potential when the fire alarm goes off, we don't want to be practicing that in that moment. So that's why leading up to it and practicing and knowing what to expect is so helpful. And I think it's one of those things that I think educators, other parents, other people will know, language rich environments from humans. Like, this is a whole nother podcast, right? Talking about screen time and all of that. But we know what research tells us is children learn from face-to-face interactions. The same skills might be taught, hats off to Miss Rachel and Miss Issa and all the educators that are doing, shows and podcasts. But children and our brains don't perceive that two-dimensional input in the same way. And so that's why parents are also, it's not just important that they're learning from a program or those sorts of things, but they're learning from us, the real people that are in their lives.
Absolutely. Because when you think about anxiety, some people that with their social skills, I mean, that is woo. Yeah. Right. So they haven't learned to socialize or say hello. I mean, or receive a hug. These are things that I do quite often in my classrooms. And, I will, we had let me give an instance. For instance, we had a child that was going to be leaving the program. And, of course, there's attachments that have happened for all of us. And so, I kind of week by week, hey, next week is this child's last week, or, and then we got to the day, right? And I took the time during our large group to have that conversation that, hey, this is this child's last day. Everybody was, we were sad. I expressed my emotions. Some of the children, I could see it on their faces, and I'm like, what's going on? And I'm like, come here. And I gave them a hug, and I said, I understand. I said, but at this point we can make memories, right? And we're gonna cherish what we're going to think back on the memories that we have, and we're going to make more memories today. So just having them to, like you said, Dr. Gigi, give language to what's actually happening and what they're feeling.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean they're still not going to have that feeling, but we're all having that feeling, and, yes, I think we have to be honest with ourselves too, with helping cope with anxiety. Being honest with yourself, being honest with the children, I think it really, really helps, because it will minimize their anxiety and it will minimize yours in whatever, what's going on at that moment.
Yeah, definitely. And they feed off of us. I also love that you created this ritual in your classroom and sort of helped with predictability. I'm a big fan of rituals. In fact, my son, so I live it and work it too. My son, who's now 22, but when he was little, had a really hard time separating and going to school. So we had this ritual. There's a wonderful little book called The Kissing Hand that we used to read, but we had a ritual where I would kiss the palm of his hand. And if he was missing me during the day, I said, all you have to do is put your hand to your cheek and I'm kissing you on your cheek. Yes. And what's really lovely is he's gone through his own trials and tribulations at this point as a young adult. But there are times when he's like, I really miss you. And I said, remember that kiss that I used to put on the palm of your hand? It's still there. And so even if I can't be with you physically, know I am always with you. And so I think creating those rituals, they may or may not have this lasting impact, but they may be one of those really important things our children hold on to. Plus, rituals just help with predictability and being able to process what's going on. And it also helps us. It helps us to regulate so we can help them to regulate.
Wow, that is it's so beautiful what you just shared. I'm very sentimental, so I think just having those moments and really because I know 2-year-olds are going to have separation anxiety. That is developmentally appropriate.
It is.
Yeah, and we have to know. That's why I was saying I think you should have a class, or you need to know developmentally where my child is. That is going to help you understand some of the behaviors in regards to anxiety. 2-year-olds have a lot of separation anxiety. They don't want to leave. And then, when COVID hit, let's talk about that, because families couldn't leave their homes. So now the only people they do know how to socialize with, and if they did talk to people, most of the time it was the way we're talking today, right now.
Right.
So there's no, like you said, the human touch was taken away a lot of times, or it couldn't happen because of maybe an elderly parent or whatever, or a grandparent. And so touch, the humanness of us was kind of not fostered in in some of the children during COVID. And so, parents, just think about that. Educators, think about that. I know we work with little ones. Yes, they're going to have a runny nose. It's given. It's given. But, build your own immune system up, okay, and help these children to cope with anxiety. All right. Can I ask you, Dr. Gigi, how can therapy or additional tools assist, parents?
Sure. So I think there are a lot of ways that can help. So sometimes we work directly with children, and that's in helping to identify emotions and coping skills. Often with little ones, we're doing it through play, but we often call it play with purpose, right? And then for parents, I agree with you. I think parenting classes they're not rocket science. Half the time we'll go there and we'll say, well, we already know this, but it reminds us of some things, or maybe it helps give us some additional insights about the age and stage that our child is in,
Mm-hmm.
and what's normal, right? What's to be expected, but then also how to cope. And if it's in a class format or a group format where others are there, there is nothing more powerful, I think, than having people who are having lived shared experiences in that
Mm.
moment. But also many therapists who work with children are trained to work with families too. And so we can do that. For children who are having more significant difficulties, there are also all sorts of treatments that are available, cognitive behavior therapy and some other things. For parents, there are also some wonderful resources. One of my favorites is Dr. Ellie Leibowitz. So if you're having trouble tolerating distress and you're rescuing your children, he has a wonderful book out there for parents about coping with childhood emotions, especially anxiety. And there are some trained providers who are also able to help families sort of gradually and systematically be able to tolerate their own distress so then they can support their children.
Okay, we'll link the book, and we'll link some resources in so that you all can have it, because information, you have to apply it, but we want you to have the information as well, right? And so I love what you let me see. Hold on. How can I say? So I have when you mentioned about sheltering, I just want to
Mhm.
kind of end on that note. Parents,
Yes.
we cannot, I love that you said that, because I've seen instances where,
Yeah. It
okay,
is
let me
coming
get this.
from a place of love. It is coming
I,
from a place of love. I
it
know that.
is, it is, touche, true. But I have seen, like, I remember homeschooling my children at one point, right? I homeschooled my sons. And it wasn't because I was trying to shelter them. I wanted to really put them in a private education. And I just wanted to make sure that, their track was kind of set. And so I was homeschooling them. But I remember we went to some swim lessons, and I saw this child, he's about maybe 8. And so my sons were trying to engage with him. And mom was it was like this, it was like a blanket, or like, I mean, I can tell when a parent is overbearing, and I'm thinking about the child, not
Yeah.
like, what is this going to look like for this child in 12 years when they have to go off or be away from
Yeah.
you. What is that going to look like? No, that's not saying we allow our children to go into every environment, or I totally, we need to keep our children safe. At the same time, in keeping them safe, are you harming them?
Yeah.
Are you harming them? Is your definition of safe really harming your child, and what the possibilities for your child can be, even regarding social emotion? Like, it's still an emotion, the emotions are still there. so,
Right.
so that is a part of their social emotional well-being. And
Yeah.
so, parents, I just want to kind of leave that as food for thought.
Mhm.
And make sure that what we're doing is not to harm. And I understand you may have you may still have anxiety about it, or you've had some challenges with that. But I want you to try to push beyond you for a moment and think about your child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and our goal as parents, right, is to help our children be able to grow up being functional and happy and healthy adults. Yeah. And so sometimes that's learning to cope with things that are hard.
Hmm. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this episode, because we gave you some food for thought, and we hope you have an amazing day.